So hello guys, as you can see I'm back home safe and sound, all in one piece, and I thought I would do a review video talking about the trip and what I thought of it, what I learned on it, and maybe a few little tips even for people who are considering it. So let me just start and talk about maybe just an overview of the whole thing. The trip was sort of interesting. It was a total of 39 days, believe it not. So of that, there were 3 days traveling, 2 days in Santiago, 2 rest days, included in 34 days of walking. So 34 days, including 2 rest days. We stopped at the end of the first week, and we stopped about maybe 10 days later, and we didn't stop again until we got to Santiago. But a total of 39 days from the day I left to the day I got back. We left on the 2nd of May. I got home on the 9th of June. Now, this was a really interesting holiday. Without doubt, one of the most enjoyable holidays I've ever had. And very different from other kinds of holidays I've had, and very different from other kinds of hikes I've had. Very different from other kind of holidays because it took a real effort. 26 kilometers on average, whatever it was, per day, walking every day for 5 weeks is a big ask. And it was that slow walking, that slow movement, as opposed to riding my motorbike, for example. So a slow holiday. And then also, I think the whole Camino aspect of it made it very different. And I want to talk a bit about that. I think the single biggest takeaway for me from it was people. Now, obviously, I did the Camino, did this walk with my daughter Ellie, and that made it extra special, of course. What father doesn't want to spend 5 weeks walking with his daughter, and especially walking something as beautiful as the Camino Frances. And also, it was a long time in the coming. I think Ellie and I have been talking about this for 16 years, believe it or believe it not. And of course, Ellie is very easy company, to the extent that, and great company, and very attentive, very sort of compassionate, I suppose, to other people, me included, to the extent that she even had my birthday cake, a slice of cake for me with 21.
Quickly before it goes out of sound.
Ellie, you're my girl. Thank you.
Of course. Younger next year.
2 birthday candles at 21, which is our little joke of me getting younger every year. She had that at the highest point on the Camino on my birthday, the 28th of May. We were at 1,550 meters or something like that. So having Ellie with me was a big part of this people thing. I'm not sure I'd want to walk 5 weeks like that on my own, being honest with you. I really appreciated having her with me and having that company, even though we didn't talk an awful lot. Just being together and walking along together with somebody you love is really special. The second thing around people is just the Spanish people in general. I think they must be the friendliest nation I've ever met. What a wonderful bunch of people. Everybody, the people running the albergues for sure, but the wait staff in the restaurants, the owners of the cafes, just wonderful people. Friendly, attentive. And they work really hard. Really hard. Eddie and I commented how all these cafes, there were 2 people, the husband and wife or the father and daughter, whatever it was. One was in the kitchen and one was on the tables, and that was it. And they work every hour of the day. We saw them there at 5:30 in the morning. We saw them there at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night. So I just thought the Spanish people were really amazing. In the albergues themselves, it's all run by volunteers, and all they're giving their 2 weeks or their 3 weeks or whatever, supporting the Camino effort. And of course, everybody you meet, everybody you meet says Buen Camino to you. They all give you that thumbs up with that fist and say, Buen Camino. And they mean it. Every single person we meet, every farmer, every person in town, they give you the nod, they say Buen Camino to you, which is really sort of inspiring. To the extent, the people volunteer to all sorts of stuff. We actually had 2 ladies in one town give us foot massage. So as we arrived going down the town for a walk, we saw the 2 ladies, and they called us over, and we were the first people. They sat us down in a chair and they gave us a free foot massage. Now, we made a donation, which is optional, but this kind of stuff, we just found it to be really, really a wonderful experience. And then, of course, all the people that you're walking the Camino with. There's an incredible sense of camaraderie. This shared goal of reaching Santiago, we're all doing our best to get there. And a lot of people were suffering, and genuinely suffering. They'd injuries, they'd bashed their legs, they'd shin splints, they had blisters, they had twisted an ankle. There were people walking along there who shouldn't have been out there at all, and people walking out there who really were hurt. It was quite an amazing experience. So the people was a big aspect, if you wish, of the difference between this and other holidays, and indeed other hikes that I've had. The second thing that really struck me was the simplicity of just walking. We've talked about, and I'll talk about it, why this thing of less is more. But you're just there and you're walking, and if somebody asks you, what do? You say, I walk. It was quite an amazing experience, and all you had to do was get up in the morning and walk. Put on your bag, your rucksack, and walk. And I just found that to be, for me, this may not be true for everybody, but for me, there was something really special about that. I stopped thinking about all the various things, the business and the work and the this, that, the other, whatever, all the things that go through your head that you feel you're responsible for, that you have to take care of. And I forgot about all of them, and all I had to do every day was walk and do my 6-7 hours of walking and get to the end. And I found that simplicity to be really refreshing. In fact, I can honestly say I'm still a little bit in a sort of zen. I'm a bit spaced at the moment, and I'm looking around me and looking at all the bits and pieces around me here in my home, out my garden, my bike, my car, my this, my that, the work, and it's all sort of out there away from me at the moment. I still feel very separate from it all, and I feel life is very, very simple, and I want to do a lot more of it. So this simplicity of walking has really impacted me. I found it very, very interesting. There's a guy called Siegel, and he was a psychologist, an American psychologist, Martin Seligman, Martin Seligman, and he wrote a really, really interesting book about flourishing and what it means to flourish. And in it he had this acronym, PERMA, for the elements of flourishing. So positive emotions, P for positive emotions, E for engagement, being in the flow, where you lose track of time, R for relationships, so positive relationships, M for a meaning, a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning, and A for sense of accomplishment, And he wrote this book. I actually met the man back in the early 90s. He was doing a workshop up in Derry around peace and reconciliation or whatever, and really interesting man. But he has this book called Flourish, and I talk about this acronym in my own life a lot, and I really experienced that on the walk. So the idea of a positive emotion, when you're walking, you're getting all the endorphins for sure, but you really feel good, even though you're struggling and it can be painful at times and hard work. There's a real positive sense. You're surrounded by these people all going the same direction, all trying to do stuff, and you really feel very, very positive. You're certainly engaged, you're certainly in the flow. All you do is walking, one foot in front of the other, looking at nature, listening to the birds, listening to the sounds of nature. There's a real sense of present moment awareness and being in the flow, which I found personally wonderful. The positive relationships, the relationships I've already mentioned, and having Ellie with me, all the people on the Camino, the camaraderie, all this shared experience of walking together, all the local people, the Spanish people, all the support you got was really, really incredible. There's a real sense of purpose. So Santiago was a purpose. The purpose was to get to Santiago. The purpose was to manage yourself and keep walking and walk the 800 kilometers, or 808 in our case, and get to Santiago. And then there's a sense of accomplishment that you really experienced every day when you completed the walk and you saw you were at 700 something to go, 600 something to go, 600 to go, 550 to go, 500 to go. There's a real sense of accomplishment that you're knocking them down, you're knocking down the miles, and you're making progress. So I think his idea of flourishing, I feel absolutely incredible coming back from it. A huge sense of satisfaction, a sense of purpose in life that I haven't felt for a long, long time. So this thing of perm, I think, is a really important element for me of the Camino. I want to talk about a couple of other takeaways from it. Sleep. Sleep is really important, and you don't sleep an awful lot on the Camino. We stayed in albergues. We stayed a couple of nights when we'd rest. The 2 rest days we actually stayed somewhere in albergue. We got a private room that Eddie and I shared, but at least we had a room where you could sleep, where there was nobody disturbing you, nobody getting up during the night, no lights coming on, all that kind of stuff. But apart from that, we stayed in the albergues, in the dormitories, on the bunk beds, and poor Ellie typically on the top bunk and me on the bottom one, but she got the bottom bed a few times. And we rarely booked. We booked the next day at most. And I had to get over the fear of not finding accommodation. We actually, one day, we were caught out in the thunderstorms, and when we got to the albergue, it was closed that day. It just closed for the Wednesday, and we walked the next one and it was full, and we had to go to the next one. We did 35.5 kilometres in thunderstorms and torrential rain that day, but that was the only day we actually got caught out. And the albergues are typically 10 to 15 euro. You need your earplugs and your eye mask, and you need to arrive reasonably early so you get a choice. You're not the last person squeezing into the worst bed, and so you can get to showers early. But this whole thing of the albergues and sleeping, it was sort of interesting. After a while you sort of get used to it, and you, as a part of the overall experience, I think it was really important to be there with everybody else. Yeah, it was all very communal. You were sharing this, you were walking there, but you were sleeping with everybody. It was, I know it sounds strange if you haven't done it, but it was really, really interesting. You can, of course, get private rooms in many of them, and you can, of course, stay in hotels. So 25 quid to 50 quid will get you a room in an albergue or in a hotel, if needs be. Food. Ellie, of course, is vegan, and she had a real challenge on the walk. Because there's meat in everything. There's Spanish meat in everything. Vegan is almost impossible. Even when Ellie got her vegan food, she would get a vegan dish, and there was egg in it. You know, they put egg on top of it, or you got your salad, the vegan salad, and the tuna and hard-boiled egg and so on. So it was very difficult for her. There was a pilgrim menu. And the pilgrim menu was simply 3 courses, but modest 3 courses. The third course might be a little tub of yogurt. Okay, so but you got your 3 courses, and you got your bread, and you got your wine or water, and you typically got it for 10 to 15 euro. And it was very acceptable, and not very exciting, but very acceptable. And you got everything you needed to keep you going. Other food was inexpensive. So if you wanted to eat differently, you could. It wasn't expensive. I would say it's about half the price, or less than half the price of Ireland. In general, I'm just saying, comment on affordability. In general, as you all know, Spain is very affordable. I mean, really affordable. But the Camino even more so, because it's set up for pilgrims. Not everybody has money, and not everybody actually, even on the pilgrimage, has money for accommodation. And so there are people walking who have little or nothing. And so affordability is a big issue. So that part of Spain I found to be incredibly affordable. More as affordable as Portugal. I consider Portugal typically to be less expensive than Spain. And the route that we took. So we took the Camino Francés. Now there's lots and lots of Caminos, and you can see them all here, all heading to Santiago. So there's ones coming down from France. We actually met somebody who walked from Colmar in Alsace, Henri, really, really nice guy. We met a guy, Charles, who gave me cream for my foot, who walked from Le Puy. We met quite a few people actually who walked from Le Puy. There were people who walked on from Paris, there were people who walked up from Italy, there was people who came across from Austria. So a lot of, and then of course in Spain itself, we met people coming up the Primitivo, coming down from the Del Norte, coming up from Portugal. So all these different caminos, all heading to Santiago. And we used Brearley's guide. It has, I think, 33 stages in it. A really, really good guide. I mean, if you're into the Camino and you're part of my family, ask me and I'll give you the guide and you can read it. So he's set up as 33 stages, but we met people who were doing 10 kilometers a day. We met people who had been doing this Camino over 10 years in little chunks. So there's 100 different ways of doing it. You can ship your luggage ahead of you. You can carry your luggage like we did. You can do it lots and lots of different ways to make it completely doable typically by anybody. You can see here the stamps I got along the route. So as you go along, you get stamps in your albergues, and then Ellie, of course, had a separate book, and she was collecting stamps everywhere she went. I wasn't, but and the last 100k you collect 2 stamps a day. And when you turn up in Santiago, they give you a Compostela. So you get your stamp and they produce your Compostela. You can also get one halfway along the route in this town, Schauben, I think it's called. And we actually popped up to the cathedral there, an old monastery cathedral, and we got one that showed that we came halfway. So for people who've done half it, they can get a Compostela. The terrain, this is a really interesting one. The terrain is very varied. So for example, you start by coming over the Pyrenees, and as I go through this video I'll be popping lots of photos, you can just see them, I'll be popping them all up there so you can see them, all the terrain we went through. We come over the Pyrenees, over the mountains, and we walk through farmland, we walk through scrubland, we walk through the Metza, and we walk through Galicia. I mean, Leon Castile, for example, is completely different to Galicia. Galicia is just like walking in Ireland. You could be in Tipperary, you could be in Mayo. It's really quite amazing. And so lots and lots of very, very different terrain. Some steep climbing. It's not like climbing mountains, although you coming over the Pyrenees, you are actually going over the mountains. But it's not like climbing mountains per se every day. But there are some steep climbs. It's not all flat. And yeah, some is quite challenging. I use the walking poles on the steep climb and indeed on the descents to protect my knees. And I found them really, really helpful. Ellie and Carl gave me these as a gift some time ago. It was my first time using them, and I'm really grateful that I had them. They make a big, big difference. They say it takes 25% of the weight off your body and 25% of the effort, and I just found they made an enormous difference. And I'll talk also about it's going slowly in a while, and I found that's very much on the hills, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Another interesting thing about the terrain was the history. For example, we were walking on Roman roads. Literally, you could see them. You can see the cobblestones for the Roman roads and over Roman bridges. We were passing by built history. I don't think I've ever seen a country for a built history like Spain. You go into a village and it has the equivalent of a cathedral. You should see these churches and these buildings, and it's all cut stone. It's absolutely beautiful. I've never seen anything like it in my life. Now, the churches are OTT. You go inside the churches and it's completely outrageous, completely over the top in terms of the gilding and the decoration and whatever. And interesting as well, rarely do you see the crucifix up there above the altar. They'll have St. James or the Madonna or their local saint or whatever. They're big into their saints, big into their locals. And I find that really, really interesting. And you come around all the churches and you walk in and say, who's the local saint? Saint Poet, you know. But I found that really, really nice. A lot of big castles, amazing castles. Of course, for the 1,000 years, over the centuries, all these various orders like the Templars and the Knights of St. John or whatever, all these various orders were established. And they had fortresses, and they protected the pilgrims because these were dangerous times. Pilgrims were murdered for their satchels, their sandals. So they had these knights protecting the pilgrims. And also, I've never really studied the history of it, but we all know that power and money, that's where it all resides. You just follow the power, follow the money. So I assume that a lot of these churches, a lot of these castles, was all about power and money, that the churches were incredibly powerful and incredibly wealthy back then. But the built history is spectacular. There's no doubt about it. And even, particularly in Castile Leon, when you walk to all the villages, they're absolutely beautiful. Medieval towns, medieval villages, narrow streets, beautiful buildings, quite spectacular. The weather, just another quick observation, the weather was generally perfect for walking. May, I think, is a really good month to do this. Now, we had all seasons. So we had cool and rain, and some rain we had with thunderstorms. We had 38 degrees centigrade one day when I nearly passed out. But mainly, the vast majority of the weather was perfect walking weather. Mid-teens to early 20s. Beautiful, beautiful weather. Bright, dry, and warm, but not too warm. Perfect weather. I'm sure when I've seen the photographs and the videos for other people who've done the Camino, and I've seen the Mesa, for example, you see it all parched and brown and people collapsing in the heat. We didn't experience that. It was all green because we went the right time of year. I assume in August, when everything's been harvested, all you see is bare land and clay, and I assume the heat must be really difficult at that time of year. I remember before I went, I don't know where I read it, but I read somewhere, they talk about the 3 stages you go through. The first stage is to strengthen the body, so your body gets hard, and I reckon that takes about 2 weeks. And at the end of 2 weeks, your body is toughened up and it just walks. You don't really think about it too much. You get out of bed at 5:30, you go to the loo, you wash your face and your hands, you brush your teeth, and in Ellie's case, you make up your hair. I didn't have to worry about that. And at 6 o'clock, you're on the road. And the ideal day for us was we got up, we walked 10k, and then we stopped. We had breakfast. Ellie'd have a coffee, I'd have my peppermint tea, and she'd have a croissant or a tartine with tomato and olive oil or whatever. And I'd have a pain au chocolat or whatever they call it in Spain. And then we'd walk another 10k, and we'd stop and have our sandwich. And then we'd walk the last 5 to 10k to our albergue, and we would check in. We would have a shower, get our beds, have a shower, and then we'd go out. We'd chill. Ellie do her journal, we'd do our little daily update video, and then later on that evening we'd have dinner. We do a laundry. We do laundry to do. We do it in between there and get it all dried. And we have the pilgrim's menu, have our dinner, and go to bed and do that the next day. That was our typical day. So the first 2 weeks were for the body, and that was how our day looked like. And the body toughened up fairly quickly. And the second 2 weeks, they say it's for the mind, and it's about developing psychological strength, and that you get used to and get over the idea of why am I doing this, and get over the idea of, oh my God, another day, and looking at the map and think, oh, I've got 500 meters or 1,000 meters to climb today, and I've got 26 or 28 kilometers to walk or whatever. To get over that and just get used to it. And the third phase, they say, is for the spirit. And I have to take one on and say, I really experienced that. And when it came to the end of it, I was feeling very, as I said, very zen, very spiritual, really just focusing on people, getting really used to, particularly the young people. One of the great things about having Ellie with me was, of course, she made contact with all these young ladies and young men, and wonderful human beings. They take not 10 years off your life, I can tell you, hanging out with them, and they're full of life, full of possibilities. And that was really, really lovely. I really enjoyed that. And I ended up mentoring a few of them. You know the way it is, you sit down, you get chatting to them, they start asking you your advice, and off you go. You know me, off you go. And I have to say, I really, really enjoyed that. It was really, really wonderful. So that was sort of the 3 stages. By the time I got to Santiago, I was feeling very spiritual, to be honest. And when I came into Santiago, actually, as I mentioned in one of the videos, came to Santiago, I thought I had a tear in my eye. And it was lovely just to stand there in front of the cathedral and hug Ellie and have our photo taken and meet some friends and just feel this wonderful sense that we did it, this wonderful sense of accomplishment. I have often said that nothing motivates like success. If you want to motivate yourself, you have to have successes. And the one interesting thing about the Camino is every day you have success. You get up, you go and do your walking, you've had a success. And that success reinforces, it builds, each day builds on the previous days, and you feel stronger and you feel more capable and you feel more positive and you feel more successful and you feel accomplished. And when you get to the end, you really, really feel it. So from my perspective, I think that was really, really important. So let me think, what else I want to say here to you? I've mentioned the ideal date to you. I just want to make one comment on that. We typically did about 25, 26 kilometers. That was our average day. We were walking at a very fast pace. We're both very fast walkers. We were walking at about a 5 kilometer per hour pace, and we tried to slow it down. I just want to talk about this thing of slowing down for a moment. And this was a real challenge for me. I always wanted to get finished. So instead of enjoying the walk, I wanted to get to the end of the day, get my walk done, and miss the walk as a consequence. And I was trying to teach myself as we went along, I think with some success, to actually slow down and try to get down to a 4 kilometer per hour pace, which is significantly slower. Going up the hills, for example, instead of powering up the hills, I just practiced 1 foot like this in front of the other, 1 foot in front of the other, and slowly going up the hill. And then in terms of breaks, I mentioned the 2 breaks before, the breakfast after 10 kilometers and lunch after 20 kilometers. This idea of breaks we found really, really helpful. And here was a general observation. It didn't matter how fast you went, everybody caught up with you. So you stopped for a pee behind a bush, you stopped to tie your shoelace, you stopped to take a stone out of your shoe, and the people you zoomed past 10 minutes ago just cruised past you. And I found that really, really enlightening. It was an interesting experience to realise that the people who were going nice and steady, the steady eddies, rolling along, they were going just as fast as you with half the effort. So, an observation. I just want to talk, before I talk about the stats, I want to talk about injury prevention and treatment. Ellie and I had no injuries, like none. I got a little blister on the top of my little toe on my left foot, and Ellie got something very, very similar between her toes at the very beginning. We dealt with the blisters, we punctured them with a needle and thread, we drained them, we let them dry, and in my case, I taped my Germaline, and then I taped them, and just taped it for 2 or 3 days to make sure there wasn't any friction. And that was the only injury I got in the whole walk. I had plantar fascia problem, as you know, before I went, and to the extent that I couldn't actually walk. I did nothing for 2 months before I went, hoping that I'd be able to do the walk. And 10 days before the walk, I got a cortisone injection in my heel. And I don't know if the cortisone injection did it, or if the cream I was rubbing in, or the exercise I was doing, or just the walking did it. But the pain vanished after a few days, and I walked no problem. One of the guys I met, I mentioned Charles. He was a wonderful man, a French man who walked from Le Puy, and he gave me this cream called St. Bernard's, and he used to say, "C'est pour les rugbymen, les rugbymen." He used to say to me that all the rugby players used to use it, and that if I rubbed it in, it would fix his problems, it would fix mine. So I rubbed it in, and that's the cortisone injection, the walking, the exercise, everything seemed to fix the plantar fascia problem, because it's gone. A lot of people have said to me that you can walk through these injuries, and maybe that's what I did as well. I know somebody who actually walked through plantar fascia problem and it fixed itself, so who knows, I don't know. The second thing I want to talk about on the injuries is the importance of shoes and socks. So Ellie and I both wore Hoka Speedgoats, Speedgoat 6. Ellie's had loads of them. It was my first experience. I was wearing Brooks Cascadia trail shoes before that. I was wearing Hoka's but road shoes before that. And Ellie was the one who sort of recommended the Speedgoats to me, so that's really what we should wear. And we wore them, and they were a great success. They were light. I have 2 pairs. I have a Gore-Tex pair and a non-Gore-Tex. I wore the non-Gore-Tex ones for obvious reasons, for the heat. And I wore it for about 2 weeks at home, or 10 days, just around the house, to get my feet used to them and break them in. And they were a huge success. Lots of grip on them because they're the trail shoes. So even though we wore all the grip off them, the Vibram sole, but lots of grip, lots of cushioning, and I just found them to be really, really comfortable. I got them and half a size bigger than I normally take, and I got a 2E width, so plenty of space for my toes. The second thing that I think probably the most important, oh, by the way, just make a comment, I also changed the lacing. I did a new pattern on the lacing to allow the shoe to expand a little bit more, give me more space. I think the most important thing was the socks. Ellie wore the socks with the toes on them, and I wore the line socks, 1,000-mile socks with the inner liner. And boy, they're the biz. They're absolutely the biz. I got 3 different pairs, the ones that barely get the top of your shoe, the ones that just come to your ankle, the one that goes above your ankle. And the ones above your ankle are the answer, because the stones don't get in, the little bits of gravel or whatever. And so I wore those, the 2 tallest ones I had every other day, or I wear them for a couple of days and wash them and wear them again. And they were hugely successful. So I really, really recommend a light shoe. I recommend a well-spaced shoe with lots of space. I recommend the double-line socks. I found those to be really, really successful. And Ellie found the ones with the toes in them. I also have a few pairs of those. I didn't bring them with me. I brought the lined ones instead. She found those to be super, super successful. The rest that I mentioned earlier, taking the breaks, taking our shoes off, we stop, we take our shoes off and let our feet rest, let the air at them. Again, the minute we found a hot spot or anything like that, we took care of it. I creamed and oiled my feet every day. I bought a pair of Hoka sandals. They're just like the shoe, except they're a sandal. And actually the trail sandals have got the same Vibram sole on them. And so every day, as soon as I finished the walk, the shoes came off, and after my shower I put on the sandals and I wore them for the rest of the day. The rest days also, I think, were important, the 2 rest days we took. And the distance, I think the 25k seems to us to be the ideal distance in terms of not getting injured and covering the thing. The treatment for the blisters, dealing with the hot spots immediately, the needle and thread, bursting them and letting them drain with a bit of thread, letting them dry out. I brought competes with me. I didn't use any of them ever. I just taped them up with some of Ellie's tape. You know, this tape you put on to strengthen, to hold muscles and things together and joints together. And Ellie gave me bits of that. I don't know what it's called, and I used that, and that was very, very successful. I had a few cramps, and this was interesting. This was a big learning for me. I was getting cramps in my calves, really, really sore cramps in my calves, but not during the walk. I was getting them at night time in bed. And Ellie said maybe it's an electrolyte problem. There's no salt, it's incredible. And so we started asking for salt every time we went to a restaurant, getting salt, little sachets of salt, and putting them on our food. But Ellie had brought electrolytes with her, and we got electrolytes subsequently. We bought them in the chemist. I started taking electrolytes, and what a difference it made. So every day at the end of my walk, I took an electrolyte, cramps went away. Really, really interesting learning. I need to do a bit of research and find out exactly what's going on there and why the cramping and the salt and the electrolytes, how it all works. But it's really worked, very, very successful. I mentioned the poles earlier, the uphills, and the poles helping making sure I didn't get injured, and particularly on the downhills. So instead of braking with my knee or my leg, I would brake with the poles. I was going down, I'd be holding the poles like this, and I'd brake. I'd be slipping my hand up through the loop, and then pressing down the loop, and that's why I held the poles going up and held them going down to take the pressure off the wrist support and getting the cadence right, so that I was actually walking like this. My arms were moving opposite to my legs, and I just think all of those things were really, really important. The last thing I just want to comment on is my backpack, getting the fit right. My backpack got pretty good, I think, but it's not ideal. And I was getting a lot of pains in my shoulder, and I had to keep it very, very tight on my shoulders to try and keep the pain off, because it's not really, I don't think it's really designed for what I was doing. I think it's more for mountaineering than it is for trekking, and I'm definitely going to change it and get something that gives me more hip support, that rests more on my hips and takes a lot of the weight off my shoulders. What else can I tell you? A few stats. So here I'm going to show you a graph. So you can see the graph there. That's the graph of our walks. So you can see here you have on the total distance there was 808 kilometers. The total elevation climbed was 14,500 meters. That's 47,572 feet we climbed. Now Mount Everest is only 29,000 feet. So you can see this was really some climb. The total elevation descent was 14,316 meters, And the total lapse time, the total walking time was 8 days, 6 hours, 52 minutes and 27 seconds. So that was sort of interesting. We did an average daily distance of 25.25 kilometres. Our average elevation gain was 453 metres. Our average elevation loss was 447 metres. And the average elapsed time per day was 6 hours, 12 minutes and 53 seconds. And you can see here the pattern on the graph. You can see that the biggest day we had was 35.5 kilometres. We had a couple of other days above 30 kilometres, a couple just underneath 30 kilometres. But you see the average was like the mid-20s, but a couple of days below 20. But you can see here, it was pretty consistent. 20 to 30 kilometres was basically the range that we were walking in on an ongoing basis. So, sort of in conclusion, lessons learned. What was the experience like for me in terms of lessons learned? The first lesson learned, I think, was how little one needs. It's interesting for me to come home and look at my books, and look at the CDs, and look at the furniture, and look at the house, and look at whatever, and look at all my bits and pieces, and realise, yeah, all very interesting, but any value it has, I put the value into it. It has no intrinsic value except the intrinsic value I give it. And I find that interesting, how disinterested I've become in it. And so this thing of how little one needs, I love the idea of walking with my rucksack, like 2 pairs of everything in it and your sleeping bag, and that's it. And you just walk, and you lead nothing. It's quite an amazing thing to finally, the penny to finally drop, that you need nothing. My great neighbour and friend John Brady has been saying this to me since forever, and I think this is the first time I really experienced it. The second big learning for me, and this was, anybody who knows me will understand this, everybody's walking their own Camino, that you have to walk your own walk. I have to stop comparing. This is a big thing, to stop comparing myself to other people walking, to stop judging them. They're not carrying the rucksack, they're getting it shipped forward, or they're only walking 100 kilometres, I'm doing 800, I this competitive thing that's in me, and anybody knows I'm fiercely competitive. And to lose that competitive thing and just walk my own walk, and say everybody else is walking their walks, and bully for them. I wish them the best of luck, and I don't really care what their walk is. I got to walk mine. I found that to be, I think that's something that will stay with me. I don't think I'm going to lose that. I think that's something I've actually learned. So on that community, I think I actually learned that, to walk my own walk and let everybody else walk their own with no judgment, and me not having to be better or worse than or anything else. I thought that was, for me, that was a huge learning. The other huge learning, Ellie said, was education. I'm not talking about getting me to eat breakfast. Any of you who knows me will also know I typically eat 1 meal a day, sometimes 1 meal and a snack. But Ellie had me eating breakfast, lunch and dinner, and some snacks in between sometimes. But that's not what I'm talking about. The other big learning was slowly but surely. I mentioned earlier, everybody catches up with you. Everybody. And I've always been a guy in a rush. And slowly but surely, the tortoise and the hare, a steady eddy, slowly but surely, and you get there. You don't need to rush. You need to keep going. The breaks, prevention is better than cure. Taking the breaks, taking care of things, making sure you don't get things, and then less is more, particularly in the gear. It's interesting. Ellie had an interesting expression she used. She said, how often does she touch things? So how often does she use a pair of shorts or sandals or a top or whatever, her camera or whatever it was. And I actually realised that I probably needed half the gear I brought. And I thought, the absolute rock bottom minimum. I have a friend of mine, Rossa, a motorcyclist friend of mine. I used to ask him about long trips on the bike. What was his advice? His advice was, bring half the gear and twice the money. But I certainly think the half the gear applies to the walking. You just don't need it. You need. I needed 1 pair of shorts and my hiking trousers, 2 pairs of socks, I should say, 1 pair of boxers, maybe 2 at the most, a couple of t-shirts, my 2 little fleece, the fleece like this, and then one a little bit heavier, my rain jacket, my cap, my phone, my iPad so I can do my bit of work, and my shoes, my sandals, my sleeping bag. That's it. That's what you need. Everything else is it's like you need your little medical kit off your toilet bag, but everything else is you don't need it. I brought hiking pants, hiking shorts, 2 pairs of running shorts, 3 t-shirts, and so on and so on, and I didn't need them. So that was a big learning for me. So that's sort of my story of the Camino, guys. I strongly recommend it. I'm a convert. There are 5 Caminos in Ireland, Eddie tells me, from 30 kilometres to 200 kilometres, all of which I plan to do over the summer. I'm in the process of exiting my business, so while I'm going to that exit, I'll hang around Ireland and I'll do those Caminos. And then my plan is, come September, I'm going to go walking. And so if you ask me what do I do from now on, my answer is going to be I walk. And even if I combine it with a motorbike, where I ride off to Turkey, I go down the bike to Turkey and I park up the bike somewhere for a couple of weeks and I go hiking. Or I go to Spain, or I go to Africa, or I go wherever and go hiking. I really want to do more of these through walks, these long distance walks. They are incredible. I feel 20 years younger. I feel like a young man again. It's an amazing experience. I strongly recommend it to anyone. And if you feel that you're not up to it, anybody who's watching this and you feel you're not up to it, I'm telling you, you are. You just have to get up to it, one little piece at a time. You don't have to go out and walk 800 kilometres. You can go out and walk 10, walk 5, walk the prom, and get yourself into shape, and then slowly but surely build up. I remember when I started running 42 years ago, I started running, and I couldn't run 100 yards. That's a fact. I used to smoke, I drank like a fish, and I couldn't run 100 yards. But I decided that every day I'd go out, I'd do 30 minutes, and I'd run as far as I could, and I'd stop and I'd walk the rest. And then slowly but surely I built up until eventually I was able to run the 30 minutes. And the 30 minutes then became being able to go off out running in the mountains for hours and hours, and then hike and so on and so forth. And I really believe this. It's a lifestyle choice. It's a habit that you form. And anybody who's listening to me or watching this, I can tell you, for me, it's been a life-changing experience, and I really recommend. So there you go. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you got some value out of following along and watching our little videos and out of this particular sort of wrap-up video. And I'll see you on the trail. Buen Camino.
21. Quickly before it goes out of sound. You got that.
Ellie, you're my girl. You're my